Hey there, Streakers. How are you today? Hopefully fantastic. I am without my co-host today, but I do have a very special guest. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Brian Simmons, a speaker, facilitator, and coach, and the founder of Evergreen Coaching, with a mission to empower leaders to think better, define a path forward, and navigate chaos to take decisive action. Brian has dedicated his career to helping individuals achieve their personal and professional goals. Before establishing Evergreen Coaching, Brian trained franchise owners at Crumble Cookie. Oh, we all like a crumble cookie, don't we? On topics like leadership, operations, and principles of success in business. He currently helps facilitate the leadership development program for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the flagship leadership training opportunity for members of the church workforce. This focus on training leaders gives him a profound understanding of leadership dynamics and the intricacies of personal development. In his coaching practice, Brian emphasizes the importance of emotional intelligence, communication, and taking action. He has collaborated with multiple organizations to speak and facilitate training sessions focused on these critical areas. He has coached or trained individuals from various industries and spread across 5 continents. His engaging and impactful coaching and presentation style has garnered praise for its ability to foster growth and transformation among participants. So, Streakers, it's really a good thing, and I'm very happy to bring Brian onto the show. Let's start streaking. What is streaking and why should you do it?
Streaking is how you set up personal winning streaks. Look at who you want to be and what you need to do to become that person. This is streaking.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jamie.
And we are streakers. Through 30 years of marriage and 7 children, we have learned the power of consecutive consistency or streaking.
To start streaking is simple. You just follow these 3 laws. Make it laughably simple, keep a record, and join the streaking community.
Streaking is your hidden superpower. With it, you will consistently progress and grow in whatever area of life you want.
In this podcast, Jeff and I will share all the fun, exciting, serious, solemn, wonderful parts of family, spiritual, professional, and personal life, and how streaking powers it all.
So join us in the conversation, join the movement, and start streaking today. Brian, I'm so glad you're here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Jeff, grateful to be with you. Thanks so much for having me on.
You bet. You bet. Our conversation started over LinkedIn, and we started to talk since then. What I'd like to do is just kick this off with the first question: is just tell us a little bit about your story. What inspired you to transition from leading to founding Evergreen Coaching? Just kind of walk us down that path.
Well, I've had a pretty diverse professional experience. I started in academic libraries, working in archives, and then later in book and paper conservation, and then moved on to teaching high school, which had always been a dream. And from there, got into corporate training and facilitation and coaching. And so that path has taken me to a lot of different places, and I'm really grateful for that. And one thing that has been a through line for me is the desire to interact with and serve individuals. And so I think coaching has become a great destination because I get to do that daily as I work with people. And so go ahead.
Go ahead. Keep going. Yeah.
So just the point of founding Evergreen Coaching was to formalize a way for me to get in touch with people who need help and want a coach to help them accomplish some of their big goals that they have for their lives.
That's great. Okay, I've got to go back just a little bit because something you said piqued my interest. From did you say archival library to teaching high school? Tell me about that little jump. That's something a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was in high school a long time ago, my goal was to teach high school, but I was scared off by the money or the lack of money, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I had a family to support, and so pursued other paths. But then as I was almost turning 30, I thought, if I am going to do this thing that I've been thinking about over and over, now's probably the time. There won't be a better time. And so I jumped into it, and that was actually the year that COVID started. And so it was an interesting time to get my feet wet in public education and And yeah, so that was the transition, was getting to live out a dream, and I did that for a few years, and the money was what I thought it would be. And so I scratched that itch and then moved on to other things.
So, when you were teaching high school, I mean, the money was what I thought it was, but what were some of the things that you felt as you taught students? Because I'm sure that that translates over into what you do with Evergreen Coaching and what you do in your work with the church is those type of things. So, what were some of those things that you felt as you were teaching students, and what was it? Was it freshman? Was it high school freshman through senior? Where was that at?
Yeah, so I taught 9 through 12,
Okay.
grades 9 through 12, and did social studies. So everything but geography and government. I taught all the other subjects, and it was really great. I really enjoyed it. The two things that I think, to your question about how teaching there might have led to coaching, first was an individual focus. I found that, especially during COVID, it was really easy to lump all the kids together into one group. And the harder thing was to try and understand their specific situations and meet them where they were to get them what they needed. And I wasn't always perfect at that, but it stood out to me as something that I was interested in trying to do. And the other thing was, when I was going through school, I was a middle of the road kind of student. I wasn't a super high achiever, but I also didn't create problems. And I always felt invisible to
Mm,
teachers because I was in the
mm.
middle, and they didn't have to give me an award, and they also didn't have to correct me very much. And so when I was engaging as a teacher, I noticed that also happening. The middle 80% just kind of showed up and did the work and left. And so I think that helped me understand that in any group, there's a certain number of people that are doing exactly what they should be doing, and they typically don't get recognized for that. They show up and do a good job and do the things they're supposed to do without praise and without criticism, and that's it. And so thinking about coaching, I feel like there are a lot of people who fit in that box as well. Most people are average people just trying to do a good job, and they don't need a lot of criticism to do that or pushing, and they also don't need a lot of praise or acclaim or awards. They just want to do a good job, and those are people that I have enjoyed working with because they're hungry enough and interested enough in progress um, that they take action, and that makes all the difference. So my time in teaching taught me those two things: the individual focus has the greatest impact, and that most people are interested in growing and maybe just need some help learning how. Not a carrot or a stick, just a helping hand.
Wow, that is what you just said is fascinating. That piqued so many interests in my mind because what I hear you saying is you've got this bell curve, and it seems that the bell curve, both ends are recognized, but it's
Mm.
the forgotten middle that, like what you said, you're invisible. You're invisible to what it is because you do your work. You go along, and so it doesn't garner accolades. But on the same note, it doesn't also garner reprimand but those two groups seem to be recognized all the time. So in your work, as you've done this with now transitioning into a more professional world, and in the leadership work that you do, how have you tried to draw that out? And the other thing too, sorry, I'm gonna let you answer that question, but there's one more thing that came to my mind, and that was what you said in regards to most everyone wants to grow and progress. And that is you and I share that same belief. Most everyone wants to grow and progress, and giving them the how is really key to that. But so back to the question that I was asking as far as in your coaching, how do you take that middle and give them what they need? How do you recognize that? What are some of the things that have changed in your coaching that helps you to bring out that invisible person and give them what they need?
A phrase comes to mind, which is energy flows where attention goes. And I find that a lot of times the leaders that work with me, maybe this, on any place on this bell curve, but a lot of times it's the average person who's just trying to do a great job. What they come to me for are is to address specific characteristics or habits that they have that they feel are holding them back. And so as I've been interacting with my clients, what I've discovered is that a lot of times the thing that is causing them the tension and the frustration is exactly the thing that got them to the point where they are now. It's helped them achieve the things that they've achieved, things like overthinking or intense passion or a strict dedication to preparation that they feel is bothering them, is rubbing them wrong in some ways. And so the answer there is, in my mind, is not to say, okay, you're right, your overthinking is a problem, let's change that and fix it. That still is part of the process, but another important part, a preliminary part, is to say that that piece of you that you're struggling with is a piece of you, and it's an important piece of you, and it should be honored for the help that it's giving you to get where you are. And I find for a lot of people, just that idea that the thing that's bugging them actually is to some benefit in a lot of ways helps them now move forward and structure it, not just to eliminate it or erase it, but to find a way to leverage what they already do naturally to take steps forward. And so as I've interacted with the bulk of my clients, it's those kinds of mental shifts that are the most helpful because they realize that they don't have to reinvent. They don't have to start from zero. They can acknowledge the peak that they're on and acknowledge that they want to get to a different peak, and that's okay. But that the whole process is about knowing where you are and where you want to get, and then charting a course without judgment, without shame for where you're coming from, but acknowledging that everything you are is what has produced these good results that you have in the moment. So that's a consistent theme that I find with almost all of my clients.
You just used one of my favorite words, consistency. and, and that consistent theme, it's one of my favorite words across the board. Wow, really fascinating as far as what you're explaining and how you take and look at what it is that they are doing and chiding themselves for and saying, hey, what got what got you here was a lot of those good things, and now being able to help them shift their mindset such that they can now use that and recognize it and not reinvent themselves when we're told we need to reinvent ourselves so many times in so many different ways. We need to reinvent ourselves. You're taking it and saying, no, what you need to do is take that strength and that passion and what it is that you think is a weakness and actually turn it to a strength.
Exactly right. Yeah, there's that common phrase, what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah, yeah.
And we usually say that in a self-deprecatory way. Like, okay, well, that means I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And what I like to say, what I share with my clients is this idea. You're not what you could be, but you're closer than you've ever been. And it creates balance in recognition of who they are. Exactly what you were just saying, Jeff. The idea that what I have is not good enough is fine, as long as we couch it by looking backwards also and saying, but I'm not who I used to be, and I am better than I used to be. In gap analysis, we always look forward from where we are to where we want to go, but we rarely look backwards at where we are to where we've been. And I think the gap and the gain have to be considered for a person to be able to move forward in a healthy way. You can achieve just by looking forward, but that doesn't make it feel any better, and it doesn't give you confidence in yourself as strongly as identifying those two things. I'm not where I could be. I have missed opportunities. I have fallen short. And yet, I'm closer to where I want to be than I've ever been before. And that gives me confidence to keep going. You need the gap and the gain.
Wow. So what I'm curious, you mentioned that, you saw in high school being in the middle and somewhat, looking at it as the invisible person. And then what else has shaped this great salient mindsets that you have? What have you studied methodologies or have you studied, you could go to the scriptures, you could go to the methodologies, you could go to any of those areas. What are some of the things that have helped you to develop these fantastic, and streakers, I hope you're listening to this because this is actually very, very salient advice.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning the scriptures. I think my answer would be twofold. One is the power of repentance
Yeah.
and my firm belief that Jesus Christ is my Savior.
Mm-hmm.
and that I can try again, that he loves me and he likes me. And that gives me confidence to
That's
try
really
again.
important. That is so
It is,
important. He not only just loves me, he likes me.
that's
Because
right. That's right.
there's a
And
lot of times we can feel like, oh, I feel loved, but I'm not very liked right now. But
right.
those two distinctions are critical.
Right. Yeah. So that personal belief I have that he sees me that way helps me to see myself that way. And the other part of that, a more secular part, I guess, is my study of psychology. So as a teacher, I've always been interested in psychology, but as a teacher in high school, I taught normal psychology, sports psychology, IB psychology, and AP psychology, and just getting into a deeper understanding of how the mind works, or at least how we understand the mind to work, and how that manifests in an outward way has been really impactful for me to start to understand why we do what we do and why we don't do what we don't do. And I find that really enlightening. So I would say, yeah, it's twofold. The belief I have about the ability to change and improve based on
Mm-hmm.
my relationship with Jesus Christ, and
Mm-hmm.
the understanding that the brain is malleable and plastic and it can change, and we can
Mm-hmm.
deliberately change it. We can do things that change our brains and change our minds.
Mm-hmm. So as we, progress down this course and as you work with your coaching clients and also the leadership that you do in the church, how do you help people to recognize and accept these, what could be considered weaknesses, but that are actually an opportunity or that have gotten you where you are? How do you work with people to help them make that mindset shift when, let me give you a little caveat on this or a little addendum, when they're somewhat resistant to it? Maybe they're a little bit like, I don't know about this. I don't know about this particular course of action. What do you do?
Yeah, I think the first thing in coaching is a coachable client. And so that can be a non-starter. If somebody is not willing to change, then coaching might not be right for them, because coaching is all about change. And
Yeah.
so the balance has to be, because change is painful as well. So the balance has to be the pain of this change has to be less than the pain of this thing I'm experiencing. And so if the balance is off for them, and you know what, I think changing is going to be more painful to me than just staying where I am,
Hmm.
then they might not change.
Yeah.
And that can be okay. There's no judgment there. That can be fine. But the way I try to approach it is to first build a relationship of love and trust, and that takes time, and that takes intentional approach. But just coming to know them as a person, and helping them see that my objective is not to correct or to change. My objective is to help and serve. And then when an opportunity arises where I see something or I observe something, I have an opportunity to train, I can then be honest with them.
Yeah.
That's the next part, is to tell the truth and to be kind. That doesn't mean it candid, like candor doesn't always have to be harsh. It doesn't always have to be overbearing. But telling the truth is important. Once you have established the relationship where a person respects you and they expect that from you, then telling the truth is the kind thing to do.
Yeah.
And so, but they have to be open to it. You can even, I've had experiences where I've tried to tell the truth after developing a relationship and it's not been received.
Mm.
And that's okay. The, the
Yeah.
person, the person, any of us on the receiving end of instruction or opinion or whatever, we have to be open. And if we're not open, then things won't change.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. When I'm closed off or blocked, there's a book that I read called Impro, which is improvisation for theater, and they talk about how there's this principle of block versus accept. And in improvisation, when an actor goes on stage and there's no script, there's no scene, there's nothing, they're making it up just basically as it comes to them. There is this point at which the person who is joining them on stage can either block what they're giving them or accept it. And what happens is, and it can be blocked in the most subtle of ways. Like, for example, what you're saying as far as truth, you can speak truth and tell people exactly what it is. And there could be a block by saying, oh, I don't know if I really believe that, or, oh, that doesn't work for me. Or it's a very subtle block. It's something that is very, real, but it's passive. It's a passive block. Whereas if they accept it, it's like, please tell me more. What happens in theater is that progresses the scene when you accept it. And that's what I look at in life. And what you're saying is, when I accept these things, it helps me to progress. When I can hear what it is that you're saying and allow it, and not allow my insecurities and to be blocked by, or to, let's put it this way, to protect my insecurities, I I allow and accept what it is that's being said as you coach me and as you bring me forward. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I really appreciate that because it ties into the idea of progress. If you're thinking about that,
Do you
that
want to grab some
blocking and
service?
accepting, is that what it was? Block and
Yeah,
accept?
block and
Block
accept. Yep, block and
Yeah,
accept.
that pulls my mind to limiting beliefs.
Mm.
And those are some of the key parts of coaching that make it really valuable is the adjustment of limiting beliefs. And what happens to a lot of people is they go through this cycle where they understand, or at least they have some idea of a place they want to go, but then the limiting belief comes in and blocks. Oh,
Yeah.
well, I probably couldn't get that promotion. I don't know. I don't think I could lead a team. I'm probably not patient enough to have kids, or whatever, whatever it is. But the limiting belief then creates an emotion, which creates action.
Yeah.
And that action produces a result, and it creates this cycle. And so understanding that our thoughts are what produce our emotions puts us in the driver's seat of creating a future that we're actually happy with. If we always just let the thought rule what ends up happening, and we're not deliberate with it or intentional with how we think, then we're going to end up feeling emotions that we're not happy with, or that are uncomfortable to us. They put us into what a coach of mine, Mitch Whiting, he calls a suffering state instead of a
Mm.
powerful state. Then our emotions take us there, and our actions then are from a suffering state instead of a powerful state.
Wow.
And it's impossible to produce powerfully from a suffering state. And so it all starts, and this is fairly commonly known in psychology, right? The idea that there's a space between what you think and what you do,
Mhm.
and we even can tighten it more to what we think and what we feel. There's a space there,
Mm.
and if we can intentionally approach that space, we can then have an impact on how we feel and then how we act, and that impacts the results that we get. And so I love that idea of two actors on a stage, because in some ways it is that. It's the you, and then your limiting beliefs you that's saying, nope, don't go this way. You can't do that.
Mm.
And finding a way to work with that person to accept more from a powerful state will produce more results that are enriching to life and enduring, that
Yeah.
can last.
So you brought up something that I've had a question about for quite some time, and this may be a limiting belief that I have, or maybe it's a opportunity to explore a little bit more, and that is the idea of feelings. And let's stay there for just a second. When I wake up in the morning and I wake up on the proverbial wrong side of the bed. So I have a feeling that comes upon me, I'm on the wrong side of the bed. I've got the actor in my head that's telling me all about the things that I can't do, and I just feel awful. One of the things that I've believed is that I can't necessarily control my feelings. In other words, I'm going to have feelings no matter what. And I'd love your correction on this, or whichever way you're going to go. But how I respond to those feelings, I have completely within my control. Just talk to me about that a little bit. What's your thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. I think the foundation of this conversation around feelings
Mhm.
is built on circumstances. And circumstances are neutral. There are things that exist and are objectively factual. Like, it's 85 degrees outside. That's a circumstance. And somebody from Alaska would say, it's really hot. And somebody from
Right.
Morocco would say, "What a beautiful day," right? And so the circumstance is neutral. If an example I've heard before is if somebody that you really loved passed away 5 minutes ago and you haven't been notified yet, how do you feel?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, if I haven't been notified, there's no feeling, if you will.
That's right. They've passed
Yeah.
away, but because circumstances are neutral, you don't feel anything. You don't feel anything until you think something. Passing away is sad. Oh, that person, I love that person so much. I hated that person. Whatever it was, whatever emotion comes next is born from that thought. And so the cycle can be fast, like you're saying. I think you're exactly right. We can have an impact on what we feel. I think that that impact happens at the level of thought. Understanding
Hmm.
that the circumstances of, I didn't have a good high school experience or a bad high school experience. My last boss wasn't happy or sad or kind or mean. I just had a high school experience and I have a boss. And
Right.
the way that I think about that will determine how I feel. And so I think you're exactly right. The way that we think has an impact on the way that we feel. And in fact, I think it creates all of our emotions are born from thoughts that we have. The tricky part is stopping and identifying the thought because we have subconscious thoughts all the time,
Hmm.
right? That just things that are in that pattern that's been built up over time. The muscle memory is so strong that the thought occurs without us even knowing. And so we
Wow.
feel like this circumstance happened and now I have this emotion. But between those, we have belief based on experience and then the thought based on that belief, which gets us to the emotion. And so it's a granular view of this that that lets you take a deliberate approach to how you move through the world because what you think will produce how you feel and that produces your actions.
That is absolutely fascinating. You've just expanded my mind on all of this because what I hear you say is no matter what, our thoughts are processing sometimes at light speed, and that thought creates the circumstance, if you will, for the feeling. And if I'm saying it wrong, I'll look for your correction. But basically, that thought creates this feeling, and I may not even perceive that the thought created that feeling because it's either happening so fast or it happens in an unconscious way that I now am not what I thought was an uncontrollable feeling is actually controllable because I need to track down what the thought was that led to that. Is that right? Do I am
Yeah.
I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'll find that this goes to principles of emotional intelligence, but I found that an easy way to start thinking about this, for any listeners who are thinking like, okay, this sounds like a practical way for me to start moving through the world a little more deliberately. One way to do that is to notice it in others. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to be introspective and self-analytical in this way. But even today, as people go through their day, they'll start thinking, okay, that person expressed this emotion or they took this action, right? One step further in this cycle. What was the emotion that led to that maybe? And what was the thought that led to that emotion? And you
Mm.
can start deducing. It won't always be right. You won't always be accurate, but just the habit or the practice of thinking through this 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 process, this system, can start to clarify in yourself when those things come up. And then in a day or two, you'll catch yourself and think, okay, I just got angry at the kids, or I just felt really annoyed with my boss, or whatever the situation may be. When you feel a strong emotion, you can then go backwards and say, okay, what did I think? What do I think about this situation? And that's where enlightenment comes because you think, wow, that's what I thought. I've never known that I thought that. And now that I know it, it's this piece of clay in front of me and I can change it. I
Mm.
can break it down. I can make it different. But until the thought is brought in front of you, you can't do that.
Hmm.
So you gotta to find a way you've got to. You don't have to do anything. But one way,
you saw my recent post on that. Like, you don't have to do anything.
yeah, totally. Yeah, right. You don't have to do anything. But if you wanted to,
Right.
if you wanted to approach this idea, one way to do it is to start noticing in others, and then over time, find that emotion that's strong and trace it back to your thought so that you can have an impact on how you feel.
All right, we're going to pause right here for a streaking moment because this is one of the words that you used was deliberate, and I believe also intentional goes right along with that. Streakers, if you're thinking, what streak could I set that would allow me to be able to do what Brian is suggesting? Here's the streak that I thought of. It is to reflect at least one time every day on a moment where you had an emotion and you didn't know what caused that emotion. It's reflect on at least one time every day. So it could be at the end of the day, it could be at the beginning of the next day, whatever it is, I'm going to reflect on one moment where I had an emotion and I don't know what thought preceded that. And by going back through your day and reflecting on that, Brian, what you're saying is that intentionality can really help you to start recognize where your thoughts are coming from and what's happening to drive some of those emotions. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as people take action on this, I think that's a great invitation, Jeff. So thank you for making that. As
Hmm.
people focus on this, the next thing they'll probably notice is that it's hard to change sometimes. And it doesn't just it's one of those things that's simple but not easy.
Yeah.
And so people can start feeling spun up in these um in the even the feeling of not being able to adjust. And so if people are feeling like that, I think one way to approach that is to think in if then as opposed to either or.
Mm.
Sometimes we get to, okay, if I can't change if I'm approaching this, I'm either able to do it or I'm not. And we just create this black and white. Instead, we can say, especially in this context, okay, I felt this emotion. If I feel this emotion again, then I'm going to jot it down in my notebook, or then I'm going to text this accountability partner I have, or whatever the action is, but to create a specific if-then statement. If I feel angry, then I'm going to take 2 deep breaths and look out a window for 2 minutes,
Mm.
whatever, as an example.
Right.
But that then gives a very structured way to work through some of these things and not feel so stuck on not being able to change, and instead saying, if this thing happens that I'm not totally happy with, then here is my response. Here's the deliberate, intentional action that I can take to move myself forward.
So then the modified streak based on that information might be to reflect on and then say a if then statement or something like that that allows you to intentionally, because I really believe that intentional deliberate action is at the crux of a streak. I mean, that's really where it is. A streak is all about acting. It's about doing the things that I need to do in order to produce the growth, the change, the progress. And so to your point, and I love that particular piece of information, it's a if then, it's not an either or. It's if I felt this way, then what am I going to do about it? And that I have the opportunity to be unstuck from that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and if your listeners are anything like me, if I just get into the reflection spin cycle and I just think, man, it can be hard to get out of that. And so, like
Yeah.
you're saying, tying it to some action, some intentional path forward can help break that cycle and get you moving a direction.
That's fantastic. What was it as you've gone along? I wanted to go one more place with this, and then I want to talk a little bit more about the work that you do at the leadership in the church, if that's okay. I
Sure.
wanted to, one of the other ways, I wanted to go to the spiritual part of this for just a second. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this because what I feel is the space between the unconscious thought and the emotion that that unconscious thought produced. In other words, I don't, we could go to the Johari window and talk about that as far as its, known and unknown and all of the different areas there. But the space between that unconscious thought and the emotion in that space, I would say that's where a lot of times, hold on just a second. Okay, I think we're back. In that space is where I feel a lot of times the Lord exists. In other words, to give us revelation or inspiration regarding ourselves to help us recognize what that, because he knows everything. And so he knows my unconscious thoughts. And so that's where prayer, meditation, the opportunity of the reflection and receiving from God what it is we can do to act. I think maybe it's in that space. And this is me just totally brainstorm, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And I agree. We share the belief that God knows everything. And he has in his being found a way to balance the infinite and the intimate.
Mm.
He is creator of worlds and universes and things we can't even comprehend. And yet also is intimate and knows each person deeper than we know ourselves or could know each other. And he's balanced that. And so in that ability that he has, he can meet us exactly where we are. And even more powerfully, he can help us identify areas that we didn't know to focus on. In some ways, he is the ultimate coach. He knows
Yeah.
when to leave silence. He knows when to step in. He knows when to let us meander a little bit and just talk it out and find our own solutions. And he knows when to put a hard stop or a hard encouragement. And so I definitely agree with you. And I think that the principle of revelation as a way to develop and align ourselves with God is indispensable. And I feel really grateful. Not everybody has that or believes in that. And I
Mhm.
feel really grateful that I can lean on that as a way to help me not be alone in that decision, in that moment, in the space you're talking about, that I just need to figure it out, or I just need to, spend a lot of time in ChatGPT or some other AI tool to give me ideas. I can go to this source that knows everything and also chooses to know me and care about me in a way that helps me navigate these things.
Yeah, that is so powerful, and I'm right there with you. I mean, he has taught me so many times in the midst of prayer or sometime during the day of something that I hadn't seen before, and now all of a sudden it came right before me. In fact, I just had a lesson on that in just, a few days ago, where I had a particular insecurity that I'd been carrying around, and I didn't see it until a specific situation happened in a very sacred place to me that that he showed it to me, and it is in the simplest, smallest way, and all of a sudden it just awakened me to this insecurity that I've been carrying for so long. And now, how do I go ahead and, if I've been carrying that, then what do I now do in order to help my confidence in this particular area? It's really fascinating. I agree with you. I encourage anyone who does not have a relationship with God to have one and to seek him out because he does care. And I love what you're saying about he's infinite and intimate, and he cares about us, each one of us individually.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you for sharing that. I think that if we're looking for ways to change our mind or shift our mindset, who better to ask than the person who created those things?
Yeah.
He created the mind, and so he can help us. He can help
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. So as we we're boy, I'd love to talk longer, but we're progressing toward an end here. But here's one of the things that I was thinking about. Wh- how do people like hire a coach or seek out a coach, or what does that look like, that process? I mean, ha- because I've often thought, and I know that there's a lot of people that say that they're coaches, but there's not a lot of people that I would trust to work with me in my life. And so
Mm.
what does that look like? How do I make that decision on who I get as a coach, and what do I do about it?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways. There are a million certifications that you can look for on someone's LinkedIn profile, for example. I think though, the one question that you have to be able to answer is, will this person help me get what I want? will this person help me achieve where I want to go? And whoever that is, it could be someone who's never claimed to be a coach. It could be someone with 30 years of coaching experience. It doesn't really matter as long as you have done the work to define where you want to head and you find someone who can help you chart that course. So there are 3 more questions that I think are helpful.
Okay.
One, do you resonate with this person? Is there a connection there? Do you feel good when you talk to them? Because they could have all the experience in the world that you want, but if you don't like them, it's going to be hard to work with them. So is there a connection with that coach? The second is, are you coachable? Are you willing to take action? Are you interested in actually doing the work to change? And the third is, do you have full trust that the process you would engage in with this coach will produce the results that you're looking for? So what is there connection? Are you coachable? And are you willing to trust the process that this person has explained to you? If you can answer yes to those 3 things, then you've probably found a coach that's worth working with. And if you say no to one of those 3 things, you should probably keep looking. And as you say, there's no shortage of coaches, right? Or, there are a lot of people who, especially in the world today, you can connect to basically anybody that you'd want to connect with.
Yeah.
And so if you can answer yes to those 3, go for it. If you can't, there are a lot of people, and you can continue searching. But find your person. The underlying principle here, I think, is find the person who will help you change. Who can help you change? And that's a person that can be a coach for you.
That's good. One other thing that you brought up, and thank you so much for that salient advice and for the opportunity we have to really narrow it down to those 3 questions. And something else that I'll emphasize that you said is the work. I have to be willing to put the work into it. I mean, if I'm not willing to put the work into it, the coaching is probably not going to do me that much good. I mean, when it
Exactly
comes
right.
down to it, right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
I have one more question for you. And it was something that was brought up that you kind of said, the AI coach a little
Yeah.
bit and saying how has AI impacted coaching and how do you foresee it coaching? Because it's relatively new out there. And I've been experimenting with Chat GPT and, putting in not only philosophical questions, but just very practical, I need to know how to do this questions and across the board. And I'm continually fascinated at some of the answers that I receive back, both philosophically and also just practically. How is it? How do you see AI? And by the way, I got to give you a little premise here. I think that AI can only help us if it's kept in the right context. If it's taken out of context, in other words, you think it's a real person, then we have a problem. But I think that there's a lot there that can, but maybe I'm wrong on that. How has it impacted coaching and how do you see it impacting coaching going forward?
I have really enjoyed using AI to provide a better service.
Mm.
So from my perspective, I have, I guess, 2 parts of my mind on it. One, what a truly world-changing, incredible resource. And it's exciting to use, and I like using it. From things as simple as, hey, I'm preparing this training for this company. What would be 2 or 3 good questions that they might have at this company? Simple as that, to I'll take transcripts from calls with clients with their permission and put it into a specific tool that I use. And then it can create like a podcast, like a conversation like we're having about based on the transcript. And it's incredible because it gives this third perspective to the client and they can listen to it in 10 or 12 minutes and be reminded, second time of what we talked about and what they committed to, how they were thinking and what changed. And also help them think, wow, that the AI phrased it in a certain way that I hadn't considered. And so that's one part of my mind is what an incredible tool. And I have loved using it and I'm excited to continue to use it to provide more value to the people that I work with. The other side is I know there's some fear about AI replacing jobs and things. And it seems like, just at the outset, a job like coaching could be easily replaced with AI because you can type in the same questions. I'm struggling with this. What should I do? And I'm not as worried about that because I think that for what you said, we are wired to be tribal, to be in groups, to be social. And so even if I can get the right answer from the internet, I always feel better if I can talk to my wife about it or talk to a mentor about it and still get their perspectives, knowing that they know me deeply and personally. And it's not just about the right answer, but it's about how could Brian receive this in a healthy way? And I can leverage time to say, I'm going to give this to him now, and then I'll give this other piece later. People can do that for me. And as a coach, that's, I think, where my main value is. It's not just about providing information or asking the right question. It's about understanding people. It's about understanding what this human in front of me needs and then catering to that need. And who knows? Maybe AI is on its well on its way to that. We'll see. But I think as a coach, with that as my focus, not disseminating information, but on creating human connection that leads to change and change in a healthy, satisfying way, that's something that I think only a human can do. And so I guess that's how, I don't know if that gets to your question, but those are the two ways I think about it.
I agree 100%. I think that, so it reminds me of, I was doing a great big keynote for AFPM, which is the American Manufacturers Fuel and Petroleum Association. And the person who was on before me was someone who had, a renowned expert in artificial intelligence. And what he shared was just mind-blowing. And I'm going on next. I'm going to be talking about streaking. I'm going to be talking about all of the practical things of human behavior and of leadership and so forth. And so here he is with this fantastic, and I was blown away by it. I was sitting there, and I have to go on next. And I'm thinking to myself, what do I do? And immediately in those moments, I'm praying. I'm like, Lord, what is it that I can do to help this? I mean, it's a 1,300 person audience. I'm looking at it going, what am I going to be able to do in order to capture their attention in what it is I have to say? Because what I was speaking about, I felt was highly important and could be beneficial in their lives, not because I wanted them to listen to me, but because I wanted them to be able to open their heart and hear what had to be said. And so as I'm walking up on stage and have this prayer in my heart, I'm asking, okay, Lord, how do I do this? And right as I stepped onto the stairs to go up onto the stage, it came to me. And the first thing that I did is I got up there and I said, that was absolutely phenomenal. What we just heard about AI and how it's going to impact all of our lives in good and positive ways and in ways that we hadn't even ever thought of. And I said, and what I realized is that AI is nothing without HI or human intelligence and that connection that brings us all together. And so what you just said was exactly where I believe we will be as a people, is connecting with one another, and that AI will help to, I believe, facilitate that. But there will always be a need for connection, a need for you and I to be able to have this conversation where I feel not only your passion, but your love and your appreciation for people and individuals and what it is that they can be and become. That is always going to be sterile in an AI environment, but it's going to be dynamic in this environment where we're connecting with each other.
Totally agreed. What a great story, a great experience. And I would just point out, it's interesting that you asked for the help and then you stepped on the stage, and that's when the help came.
Yes.
So often the clarity comes after the action, right? We take the action, we get the clarity, and that leads us to confidence. So I really appreciate that. That's a great example of that.
That was a great call out. I never even thought about that before because it didn't come before then. I'll tell you that. I was nervous going up on that stage. So, well, Brian, this has been a fascinating conversation and one that I've really enjoyed, and I appreciate your time and your effort that you've put in to prepare for this. I know that. Is there anything else that you'd like to comment just before we finish up here?
I think maybe just an invitation to find alignment. It's really easy to get lost in the weeds of tactics and, here's how you can think about this, or here's a strategy to do that. And I don't think any of that matters unless you know where you want to go. And that's all about alignment. Where are you headed? And why do you want to go there? And are the actions that you're taking aligned to that outcome, to that purpose, to that deep why? And so in all of the ideas out there about self-improvement and finding strategies, don't lose sight. My invitation is, don't lose sight of your deep why and doing what you can to align your current actions with that deep why so you can get where you want to go.
That is fantastic. And Streakers, you know, and you've heard Jamie and I both talk about who do you want to be and aligning your actions to that. And exactly what Brian is saying, as far as that is your deep why, the who I want to be, who I want to become, and knowing and understanding that. And one of the things that we encourage, Brian, you should know, is for people to write what we call their B statement. This is who I want to be, and to
Yes.
delineate that and focus on it, and then align your actions behind it. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Streakers, I know also that you have as well. If you would like to ask, is there a way that people can contact you, Brian, if they want to ask questions via email or something like that, or maybe a social media page? How would they contact you if they want to ask questions?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great way. If you just search Brian Simmons on LinkedIn, Evergreen Coaching will pop up. And then if individuals want to email me as well, it's evergreencoaching.ec@gmail.com. Yeah, I'd love to interact with anybody who has questions or wants to follow up.
Well, that'll be great. Well, and I will put that in the links to the podcast, Streakers, so that you have those there. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, if you have any questions of me or Jamie, we'd love to hear from you. Email address is Jeffrey, Jeffery, at mystreaksapp.com. Again, that's Jeffrey, Jeffery, at mystreaksapp.com. You can also email Jamie at jami@mystreaksapp.com. Until we talk together again, we hope that you have a marvelous, fantastic, wonderful day. And as always, keep streaking.
It's the little things that make a better you.